Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya master Anne-Marie Young. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And anyone who's ever experienced chronic illness is going to appreciate this topic today. And it doesn't matter what kind of chronic you're talking about. It could be something really severe. It could be something simple. I mean, I've been myself over the last 6 to 8 months, I've been dealing with some headache issues. But it can be something as simple as that. It can be something very severe. It could be somewhere in between. But they all share one thing in common. They're chronic, they're persistent, and they're confusing as hell, trying to figure out what you do about them. And if you go to mainstream medicine, good luck getting a good answer out of that one. You're going to have to find it somewhere else. So that's why I'm kind of looking forward to today's conversation with Fiona Thorson, who has been through a similar journey herself. Fiona, welcome. How you doing?
Thanks. Good. How are you, Walt?
Doing fine, thank you. And we'd like to hear your story. I mean, you've been through the mill that so many other people have been through in various ways. What was your mill like?
Well, yeah, it was a long one. It felt pretty long. There was about 10 years before I got any sort of diagnosis that I could work with. I was struggling with different types of symptoms, and I got a couple of different, minor diagnoses like, oh, you have a thyroid thing, so just take some medication and you'll be fine. Or appendicitis or, bladder infections. And just these little pesky things coming and going, and stomach problems, and it was like 10 years I was in and out of the doctor and getting tests done, and they would come back negative. So it was like, okay, you're fine, everything's negative. So then I'd go home, I'd scratch my head, okay, well, now what?
If I'm so fine, why don't I feel fine?
Yeah. And so it was just gradually I got worse, and there was a time actually where I thought, maybe, like, is this in my head? Am I making this happen?
Sure.
Am I making it up? And I dove into all kinds of stuff, alternative healing, and got into yoga for a while, and that was quite helpful as well. I taught yoga for a little bit, Kundalini yoga, and that was great. It was a great experience. The healing arts, I dabbled in all of it as a practitioner and as a client. So just partly because it was interesting, but also partly I was trying to tackle what was going on with me because it just kept going. And then by 2004, the symptoms started. And by 2014, I was at my worst, where I just had a major crash. I was sick and weak. I was having panic attacks. I couldn't function. I was in a lot of pain. And so then I got a diagnosis of Lyme disease. I had to get a test done through a lab in the States, because in Canada, they don't really have reliable tests. So I got this test done. It came back positive, and I thought, well, great, that's good. Now I got something to work with.
You know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had a good couple of naturopaths to work with, and even one or two pretty open-minded doctors who were willing to try out the antibiotic regimen with me. And that didn't really do anything for me. Some of the naturopathic stuff did help a little bit, but I had to hit it really aggressively over 2014 and 15. And I started to feel better. It was about 10 months that I was really like down and out and off work and stuff. And then I got better to a certain degree, went back to work. And then I was still having relapses from 2015 to 17 or 18. I was having relapses. And I'd even considered going for this pretty heavy duty treatment. I don't know if you've heard of these. I think it's called Lyme and Cancer Services. They have them, these clinics in Mexico and in Germany, where people with Lyme will go for 3 weeks. They do hyperthermia and a whole bunch of other treatments. And I almost went, but it was a lot of money, and I had talked to a couple of people who still relapsed after doing it. So I thought, nah, I'm just going to stick around. And in the meantime, I was learning more alternative stuff, and I came across somebody that I followed on YouTube for a while named Tony Pantillaresco, and he shows people how to make their own remedies and medicines and these little devices. And he's the one who introduced me to nanoparticle poisoning. And when I started using his devices to help get rid of the nanoparticle toxicity in the body, that combined with heavy metal chelation and reducing my electromagnetic exposure, those three things really just like I started to get better, and I didn't relapse, and it's just gotten better and better since.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Like, whoa, yeah. That gets your attention, especially after all that.
Yeah.
Oof. Wow.
Yeah.
And I have the nano is new to me. I have no. Emery, are you familiar with that?
No, that's a new one for me as well.
Yeah, tell us about that one.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. I like to say that I teach this from a patient perspective because I was kind of an expert patient, in and out of the doctors, like many sickly people, right? You get to know how to navigate the system.
Mm-hmm.
So when I learned about this, I knew a little bit about heavy metals, but the nano was very different. And basically, there's nanoparticles in a lot of different products, like medications, for example. It's called a nano delivery method. So they'll have a programmed nanoparticle in, say, a cancer killing drug or a painkiller, and that particle will help deliver the drug to the part of the body that needs it the most. So it gets there quickly. So if you're having a migraine and you take this drug, it goes straight to your brain or your nervous system or whatever, and then you feel better quickly. But the problem is that these nanoparticles, they're in a lot of things nowadays. You can actually easily find many products that have nanoparticles in them. But the problem is that when these accumulate in the body, they will start to come together, like assemble together, and they form these little threads and fibers and stuff. And then they start to cause havoc in the body. So, yeah, my friend and mentor, Tony, and some other people learned how to make these little electromagnetic pulsing devices and use their other detoxing, herbs and things to get the stuff out. And that's really what stopped the relapses for me.
That's really remarkable because, I mean, I'm not an expert at all, but a nanoparticle is a microscopically small thing. It's nano, I believe, is 1/1000th. So it'd be 1/100000th of a meter. If you can imagine how small that is, it's tiny. And in fact, nano has achieved its biggest, I guess you could call it attention, its biggest level of public awareness through computers. Nano as a measurement of computing power and computing size, and there's a whole science to that I won't even get into. But nanoparticle as a medical or as a biological it's almost more science fiction than real, although it's real.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of the reasons why I had certainly not heard of it as an actual thing until you mentioned it. I had always heard about it in fictional realms. So I'm kind of fascinated.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's even some products out there that now like supplemental products like nano silver or nano silica or nano size anything. Like we can absorb and process the micron size, like salts, magnesium, everything that you take for vitamins and minerals are on a micron size. But once they're in the nano size, they cause too much havoc on the system, and then they form these networks, which then cause havoc on the system more. So, I'm not sure exactly why they would put these supplements, these minerals and vitamins in the nano form. Maybe they figure it's more effective, but there's lots of studies out there.
On the computing side, what they're trying to do with nanotechnology, as it's often called, is they're trying to insert these little teeny tiny organisms and get them to do exactly that, to network together, with the idea that by kind of like with, let's say, well, this is kind of a negative example, but a bot farm that tries to take over a chunk of the internet, kind of like that same idea, only on a very small microscopic level. The idea being that if you can make that happen, then it becomes possible to affect things at, say, the DNA level or at the cellular level, trying to, resolve disease situations and so forth.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what the dream is. I mean, I have no idea how far along they are with the reality of it, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of studies out there on the benefits and the toxicity. So there's both sides. There's a really interesting video by Rice University where they actually show how these nanoparticles assemble in the lab, and they've got, their material, and they put it in a box of, this protected box, and then they fire lasers at it, and these frequencies affect the particles, and they start to assemble. And so that's, I mean, maybe that's part of the computer technology, but I think that's also what's happening inside the body when these things, we get hit with the electromagnetics. If we have some of that stuff inside of us, then they're gonna form. And it's if you've heard of Morgellons disease,
Yeah,
it's basically the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. And I mean, to me, it was all so weird and far out there too. I didn't believe it.
I mean, it's kind of like finding that you've been invaded by Star Trek.
I started using the device. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask a question. So how exactly are they causing havoc in the body? What is it? And you said they kind of cluster up, but what is it they're doing to your body?
Well, I would think I think it's just like any other pathogen. Like, as an example, one of my many symptoms back then was I had really painful periods, and they were so bad that the doctors said to me, "You probably have endometriosis." But the only way to truly diagnose that is to do surgery and go in and look and then clean it all up. I never did the surgery, thankfully, but everything that I was showing clinically pointed to that. After the first 3 months of using this anti-nano device that I got from my friend, well, actually, in the first couple of instances, I had stuff coming out of my body, out of that area of the body as well, that were these fibrous type of things.
Wow.
And then 3 months of
so fibrous mean to the point where you could see it with the naked eye.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then after 3 months of doing that consistently, my periods went back to almost completely normal. And so I thought, well, I'm seeing it come out of me, and I have this major change in symptom. I'm going to keep going. And I'd even have, like the Morgellons thing, sometimes I'd pull something out of my skin, or, and you could see some funny looking stuff under a microscope when you look at it.
I mean, the phrase that keeps coming through my mind over and over again, it escaped the lab. I mean, that's what it sounds like.
It does.
Yeah.
I do believe, I mean, I know it's maybe not for your audience. Maybe your audience is used to hearing
they hear
bizarre stuff. Good.
Yeah, this isn't going to freak anybody out, but it's going to raise some eyebrows, because, I mean, I don't know how many of our audience have actually heard about nanoparticles as an active thing in the human body. It's, like we said, it's certainly new to us. Yeah, that's pretty wild. That's crazy stuff. And so you come out the other side, and, well, first of all, you must have been relieved that you finally got through all that. But what else were you feeling?
Well, so like I said, my menstrual cycle started to regulate. Even my eyesight got better. My prescription went down like the next couple of years later, after not much, but just a little bit.
Doesn't have to be much. That's still impressive every time.
Yeah. I started to feel stronger. So back when I was really sick, like, if anybody who's got fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, like, it's hard to lift things or, climb a hill or even climb stairs. It can be really painful afterwards. And for me, it was, I would, even just lifting groceries or going out and getting groceries, or I was in pain for days afterwards sometimes. And trying to work out I couldn't do the yoga anymore. There's no way I could do it. I even tried it as gently as possible, and I was still in so much pain. But after this cleansing process started to occur, I noticed I didn't have such intense pain anymore. And I was actually feeling that, like when you go to the gym and you pump some iron and you know, the next day or two, you feel that kind of good
The
pain
burn.
in your
Yeah,
muscle.
right.
Yeah.
That was starting to come back because I
Mm.
hadn't felt it in years. I'm like, wow, my muscles are regenerating. That's what it felt like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's been like that since. Like I can do stuff again. I can hike and climb and not well, to a certain degree. I'm not an athlete, but nothing compared to 10 years ago when I was really sick.
So not like the old doctor joke where the patient asks the doctor, after the surgery, will I be able to play the violin? And the doctor says, sure. He says, great. I never could play the violin before. So,
Awesome.
But it sounds like you've totally got your quality of life back.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
that's
Yep.
exciting. Yeah. What kept you going?
That's a good question. Well, I had my parents' help, so that was a huge help. My mother came to live with me for a little while first. She was a nurse, so she was happy to take care of me and stuff like that. And then I moved back with her to my father and stepmother's house while I was at my worst, and they helped me out. So my parents were a big part of that. And there were times too, I guess, because there was, moments when I didn't, at my sickest, I was like, the question came up, like, how am I going to do this? People say, take it one day at a time. But to me, one day was like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can do one more day like this. It was just too long. So I thought, okay, how about 1 hour at a time? I'll do 1 hour. So I look at my watch. I'm like, okay, that's the time. And then, later on, whatever I was doing, I'd look at the watch. Okay, I made it an hour.
Yeah.
I'll do another hour. And so that's how I did it. And I'd have to say, like, facing your possible death, which really it was, because there was times I wasn't sure if I was going to wake up. It wasn't anything frightening really, but it was just like, it was a deep thing. It was a deep thing that I just was like, okay, I just have to just go into this no matter whatever's going to happen. I'm either going to get better or I'm going to die. Just accept it.
You were in for the duration. There was no escaping it, and so you just embraced that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. The other thing I'm really curious about, and I imagine Anne Marie is too, what was this special device? I'm trying to imagine how this guy on YouTube invents something to remove nanoparticles from your body. I'm really curious. How does that work?
Well, his name's Tony Pantalleresco, Tony P for short. And he was recommended to me by someone in one of the Lyme disease support groups that I had started to go to. And he was doing a podcast. I started using some of the remedies that he was making or showing us how to make. And then I listened to the podcast and I was listening to him. He thought back when he was sickly, he's a herbalist, but he was afflicted with Morgellons disease. And he thought maybe it was Lyme, or he thought a bunch of different things. And then he was collaborating with another guy. This other person with similar problems called him up and said, you're not dealing with Lyme disease or this like a organic thing called Morgellons. It's actually nanoparticle toxicity. So those two guys, and I think there were a few others, I don't know who was all involved, but they worked together researching and somehow figured out that if you hit something like the programmed nanoparticle with an electromagnetic pulse, an opposing field, it's kind of like if you have a credit card and you put a magnet to your credit card, if it's strong enough, it's going to wipe out the program from that credit card. So all you have is a piece of plastic, right? Your balance is gone, your name is gone, everything. And then, so it's kind of like that, using that device on your body, you wipe out the program. So now and sometimes it even breaks it, because when this stuff comes out, if you see it coming out, it's in pieces sometimes. So you put this, it's a triangular, there's two different ones, a triangle that you just kind of place on the body wherever you want. And then there's another one that's a bucket with wires and magnet around the outside, and you can use it as a foot bath. So you hit the body with that. It doesn't feel like anything. You can't really feel anything. And then you do all the detoxing, like a lot of similar to what probably most people know for detoxing, but there's a few things that are more specific to heavy metals and nano. So, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. So these guys figured it out. Tony came up with those two devices, and he's been showing people how to make them. And I also teach people how to make them and go through some of the detox stuff that I've kind of accumulated along the way.
This is almost like listening to a fantasy or a science fiction podcast, because I mean the solution that is often given in such a program, a movie, television program, whatever, is to use an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse, in order to kill off the nanos. And that's exactly what you're doing. I'm thinking, wait a minute, it's like out of Starship Atlantis or something, you know, Stargate Atlantis. It's like one of these things. Like, you got to be kidding me. And if we're actually doing this in real life, that's amazing.
And you can make it yourself. Like, it's fairly easy to make. Like,
yeah, I mean, electromagnetic pulse. That's essentially sending out an electromagnetic wave. It's just, I mean, anything that has electricity to it, anything that has light to it, usually there's some kind of a pulse going on there. So it's not difficult for me to imagine that something like that could be created. I mean, I'm kind of curious to know about that particular design. I don't know what you can tell me about it, but just what you were describing, it's like, oh, that's kind of fascinating. But yeah, really. Wow.
Well, you mentioned the like science fiction movies. There's even a scene in The Matrix, if you remember, where they use at the end where they use the EMP on the Sentinels. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, the Sentinel. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Same thing. Same idea.
Same idea.
Yeah. This is. I really did not know that we had anything going on with nanoparticles in the human body today in reality. I've heard rumors of investigations and so forth, but anything that's actually out. I mean, this literally does sound like something that just escaped the lab. It's really what it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
And kind of makes me wonder how many other people have. In fact, I'm kind of taking a little self-inventory, wondering, does that have to do with these headaches I've been experiencing? I don't know. Kind of curious. I'm not sure how I test it.
Is this something that's recognized in the medical field, this little machine?
No, I would say the closest commercial machine that I know of to these things would be the PEMF, PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic frequency mats. But those are, I don't know what's all involved inside those things. I know they have coils of some sort, so you would kind of get sort of a some sort of opposing field, electromagnetic field in those mats. Maybe they take care of the nano. I don't know. I don't know if anybody's ever tried it and studied it and had the same results as with these other devices that we're using. I don't know. I don't think there's really any, official studies out there. I think it would be a hard, when I first was learning about this, even when I was still seeing the stuff come out of me, I was still like, this is just too weird. I don't really believe it yet.
I don't blame you.
Until I saw more.
What were you supposed to think?
I think that would freak me out a bit. Just watch this stuff going out. It would just, Oof.
And then I actually I did bring it to a couple of doctors. I had some pictures of my samples that I had through a microscope. I don't know if I brought the actual samples in, but I had pictures. I tried maybe 3 or 4 different practitioners, MDs and other types, and they all just went, I don't know. If it's working, keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, you think about it, the way medical science is performed, it's based on averages. You study a population group and find out how prevalent something is, and then you try to apply some kind of a condition change to see if it accomplishes anything. That's how medical science is done. The biggest challenge there would be identifying a target group to work with, because as far as I know from what you're describing, the only way to know whether somebody has that is to apply the treatment.
I think that's probably true.
You can't create your target population to test on because you don't know who they are.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually is a question that people ask me sometimes when they come to me for help. Like, well, how do I know if I have this stuff in me? Yeah. I said, you just got to start using this, and
Try it, see
and
what
then you'll
happens.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If something happens, then you know, yes, you have it. If it doesn't happen, then nope, you don't have it. It's fairly straightforward, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And so what I mean, this is not a difficult question to answer, but I got to ask it anyway. What drove you to decide to start sharing this with the world?
Oh, I started a blog, actually, the blog that I have now. And well, first of all, once I started to see the benefits I was getting, I was like, wow, I need to learn more about this. So I was hounding Tony by email. And I said, can I just like, piggyback on you and learn some more? So yeah, so he and I started chatting some more, and I learned quite a bit from him, and then, other people too, who are also figuring things out. There's actually a group of people that I've met through him that everybody kind of comes from a different background, nurses, and not everybody in the medical field either. So we kind of share information and share what we've had for our own results. So I started the blog because I thought, people have to know about this.
Sure.
Like, if I was this sick and I got better, then maybe some other people can.
Yeah.
So that's why I started the blog. And then it was just a blog idea, and then I was getting emails, like email after email, with the same question: how did you do this? I want to know how you did it. So I was writing the same answer back all the time, and I thought, I got to do something with this. Like, I put it in one thing that I can just pass it out. So I've made a course out of it now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Now we can't leave that dangling there. How do they find the course?
It's on my website on fionaforhealth.com. You can see Nano Detox Coaching. There's a button. That particular one at the moment will lead them to the recorded program. But if they want to wait just a couple more days, I will post the live link. So we're going to do a live course in November. I've gotten the dates. I forget the date. I think it's mid-November. I'll post it. Maybe I'll send it to you guys later.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So we do 4 hours in total. We'll do like a Tuesday and a Thursday, 1 hour each. And then the next week, a Tuesday and a Thursday. And so I'll teach people how to make those devices and do a bunch of the detox methods that go along with it. They get the instructions and some documents to help them along.
Fantastic. Wow.
I think what I love about this is it's something that somebody can make themselves. It's not an expensive gadget that somebody has to fork out for to get their health. It's something that sounds like it's relatively affordable, that people can actually do.
Yeah.
Themselves.
Yeah.
I
like,
love that concept.
It can be a bit overwhelming for people, like, especially if they're quite sick and they're brain fogged and they're like, I don't know, I don't want to make it. It just seems a bit overwhelming. But once you do it once, it's like, it's easy.
And I imagine from what you were describing, you get some biofeedback that tells you that this is worthwhile. So then it becomes easier to do it the second time.
Yeah. I think yeah, it's definitely worth it, and one thing though I have to say is that it's a lot of people with these type of chronic illnesses, autoimmune issues or whatever it is, oftentimes it's a buildup, it's taken time of building up of toxins in their body to get as sick as they are. And so it's going to take time to backtrack on that. So for me, it only took a few months to see some major symptom changes, but it was at least 6 months in total before I started to feel that good muscle feeling. And then it was a year that I was like starting to do a proper hike again. So, and it just, like I said, it just got better from there. So it was a gradual decline and a gradual repair of my body.
It's almost like the body was having the nanoparticles teased out of it.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? There's I saw a couple of the blurbs on your website with, people talking about, the mind and visualization. And I know that there's a big connection to trauma and emotions and our health as well. And that's something that I don't teach in the program, but I know there's a huge component to that. So I tell people, like, if there's something to work on there, then do that too. Don't just do one or the other, but do that too. Because I do believe that it's almost simultaneous. Because I also had a big emotionally traumatic event back when my symptoms started, but I didn't realize I was dealing with it until much later. And having these very physical, seeable results, I kind of just was like, oh yeah, the emotional part wasn't on my radar, but I did work out through the emotional baggage that was in there as I was cleaning the body out. So
how big of a component was that compared to the physical side?
It's hard to gauge.
Yeah.
I'd say it was a pretty big component.
Okay.
Looking back, I think it was a big component to it. Yeah.
Okay. It's not surprising.
I was just thinking, I would imagine, like, to sort out that mental side of the emotional side of, like, the trauma is very hard to do when you're physically exhausted and physically in pain. So just relieving that then gives you that capacity to do it. And
yeah,
I would imagine, a year is a long time, but isn't a long time. If you could say to somebody, like, if you could alleviate one symptom, that would make life a little bit better. And long term, you'd see so many benefits.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the challenge. Can you, I guess a lot of it has to do with how much pain you're experiencing and how much you want to get better, but can you stick it out long enough to get the result you're looking for? That's not always easy to do. If it's not happening, I mean, we live in the age of instant gratification. That doesn't really fit into the category of instant gratification.
No. Well, and maybe, see, I try to think about, like, what came first. It's like the chicken and the egg. What came first, the emotional trauma or the physical trauma? I think it's simultaneous. I know a lot of people would say, no, it starts in the aura first or the spirit first and makes its way through, but I don't know. For me, the going through that whole physical thing was probably the wake-up call to deal with those deeper things.
Right.
It makes sense to me, actually, that they would be simultaneous.
Yeah.
The other model, and I understand what you're talking about, but from my perspective, the other model, the one that it has to penetrate your aura first, and then you get assaulted by it, and then all that. I think it's just kind of a way of trying to say, it's not my fault. I didn't do it. I didn't attract that. I didn't bring that into my orbit. It's not me. I'm a victim here. And that's a totally understandable viewpoint and position to be in. But it also kind of gets mocked by what you actually end up experiencing.
Yeah. Because, nobody wants to suffer, and nobody wants to admit that we've done this to ourselves. But I think it's a deep thing that just, if you're punishing yourself for something, or, because let's say you were traumatized by someone in your past, if you're reliving that in your mind, that person is not still the cause of it. It's something in your mind. So in a sense, you are the one doing it to yourself.
Yeah.
It's just but it's not your fault at the same time, because you just haven't processed
it's never
it, right?
fault. Yeah, fault is not actually part of the equation at all. Yeah, but we somehow find ways to get it in there anyway. Because we're good at that. So as you were going through your healing, and I kind of imagine, I'm thinking about what I'm going through right now. Like I said, I've been dealing with some headache issues. I've been seeing a naturopath about it. We've been making some dietary changes, and actually there was a point where I was wondering if I was actually improving. It seemed like I was deteriorating, but I think I found a few things. So you kind of experiment is what I'm trying to say. You get a sense of what's going on in your own body as you're going through one of these things, just because you're paying so close attention. And I think that learning process possibly is what leads us to the understanding that we have a role to play in this. Even if, even if we're still trying to bring blame into it, we still become aware of this. We become aware of how there is an interactive component, I guess you might describe it, that goes on. And it almost becomes unavoidable, I think. I mean, I can only speak from my own experience, but just from where I come from, it feels like you either give in and just say, oh, I'm a victim, doctor, fix me, or you take some responsibility and say, I'm going to figure this one out somehow, which is what you did. I mean, you were somehow deciding to, I'm going to fix this out, to figure this out. I'm going to fix this somehow. I don't even know how to do it. Yeah. I'm just going to keep taking steps until I get there, which I think is actually the most admirable and wonderful way to go about doing something.
Mm-hmm. I think the other thing, one of the other things that kept me doing that, kept me going forward was, at one point I did see a doctor who referred me to a, I guess it's kind of like a pain clinic. They help people with chronic conditions, basically live with their chronic conditions and how to balance their day, because when you're in a lot of pain and tired, you have to make sure that you rest, or you have to, find different ways to, accommodate yourself and the pain that you might have. So I was at this clinic. I saw a nurse practitioner and I started getting magnesium IVs. I saw a dietitian, I saw an occupational therapist, and eventually, so we would see all these different practitioners on a regular basis. And we would also do like a group sort of therapy session, and we would discuss these things like, okay, if you're sensitive to, they told us no scented products at all. So one of the discussions was, well, what do you use for hair product? Or what do you, or how do you deal with your time? Or how do you deal with your pain? Blah, blah, blah. And I just remember sitting in one of these sessions, and I felt really bad for everybody there, because I think it was all women that day. It was men and women in the clinic, but mostly women. And I just, at the end of the session, everybody got up to leave, and I was sitting there. I just couldn't move, and I started to cry. I was waiting for everybody to leave. And one of the counselors came back in, and she sat down in front of me, and she just waited for me to talk. And I asked her, does anybody here ever get better? She said, some of them do. I said, I don't, like, who? Because I see a lot of, it doesn't look like it to me, it doesn't look like it. And I said, I can't see that happening for myself. I said, I kind of just want to, I was trying to get some kind of disability assistance at the time. And I said, I can't afford to work or live here because of this. And I said, I'd like to just get this disability pay if I can, and then go live somewhere where it's really cheap and maybe hot. And she said, so do that. And I went, huh. Okay.
Huh.
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
So, and I just realized, I mean, I didn't, I got a little bit of help with, government help, but not like, I didn't have to go on full assistance, thankfully. But it made me realize, that conversation made me realize that although their intentions at this clinic were good, I realized they were trying to help me live as a sick person. And I was just like, I don't want to live as a sick person. And why should we, and I was young, in my 30s. And some of the other people there weren't old. We weren't a bunch of old cronies walking around, So I thought, there's something wrong with this. We shouldn't all be this sick. So I think that's what was one of the things that just made me go, okay, I'm on my own. I'm going to just keep looking.
Wow. That's a testament to your spirit and your character that you were willing to do that. It really is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you go back to them with your findings of this machine?
No, I never did go back to that clinic. No, I think I tried showing this. That was when I showed some of the samples to a few of the practitioners, a couple doctors, and especially the MDs. It wasn't just like, I don't know, it was more like a wall. And I thought,
shame.
okay, maybe this is just totally outside their realm. Maybe they don't even know anything about it, or if
I'm
they
sure
do,
they don't. Yeah. But it was also, there is a philosophy to mainstream medicine, to the MD style medicine. There's a whole philosophy to it.
Yeah.
And anything that doesn't fit that philosophy, that just doesn't get handled. It doesn't get processed.
But you know what? One that I spoke to, it was his response too, also helped me realize that I could be doing this on my own. He said, he was one of those who said, I don't know anything about that, but if it's working for you, keep doing it. Whereas some of the others were just like, I don't know what that is, and do this instead, take this medication or whatever. But just the admittance that he didn't know what it was.
I love that.
I was like, okay, thank you.
That's a rare level of honesty. You don't get that very often. Yeah.
No.
That's really good. Kudos to him for doing that.
Yeah.
There are more and more mainstream doctors who are kind of rebelling against the system and saying, this isn't working. We need to do something better. And some of them are exploring alternatives and so forth. And they're the ones who have that open mind, who say, you know what, my scientific mind doesn't know the answer here, and I'm not afraid to admit it.
Yeah.
To me, that's the ultimate scientist right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, I appreciate what he was doing entirely. But Anne-Marie, do you have more questions here? I mean, this is just so fascinating. I'm looking at the expression on your face as Fiona is talking.
I'm just really grateful that, you were able to find this. And if the medical field are not listening, it's brilliant that you're out there promoting it. You found it, you've tried it, you live and breathe it, and now you're sharing your word. I just think that's amazing.
Thank you.
Because it really will make a difference.
Yeah, I hope so. It's a tough one, to talk about with people, because we talked about all the weird side of it. You don't have to get into the weird side of things, but it's kind of just something you got to.
It's realistic, though, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was telling you before we got started, Fiona, before Anne-Marie hooked in, that that I started this podcast 12 years ago, and I gave you the whole story about how all that happened. When I started, the topic of law of attraction was about as woo-woo as you can get. That was 12 years ago. And in that 12-year period, my God, the law of attraction, it's hard to find a guest who doesn't know what it is and doesn't believe in it. It's a night and day scenario compared to 12 years ago. So if that's what happened in 12 years, and if everything is accelerating, which I believe it is, because everything seems to happen faster and faster, I don't think we're going to have to wait 12 years for people to start thinking that what you're talking about is not woo-woo. I think it's going to be a lot faster than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably the biggest challenge is just going to be how many people hear about it.
Yeah, it's starting to pick up already. People are starting to talk about it. And there's a number of people on, I forget what channels, Substack for sure, who are, looking at samples of, the jabs, the COVID jabs and other jabs, and their own samples from themselves. And they're seeing similar stuff that I have seen and my friends have seen. So one of them, I can't remember. I think I have a list of people on my Substack who I would recommend, and some of them are doing that research.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so exciting. It's exciting on a number of levels, not the least of which is, I don't know how many of those people would self-style themselves as scientists, but they're behaving like scientists.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like they kind of just had to figure it out, maybe. Yeah.
But to me, that is a wonderful throwback to where science used to be. Science used to be an amateur's activity, usually wealthy, because they were the only ones who could afford to spend any time doing it. But it was individuals who self-styled themselves as scientists, and they adopted scientific ways of thinking and so forth. And they wrote letters to each other and shared their findings about stuff that was of interest to them and so forth. It's a form of science that has, to some extent, been lost in the modern scientific machine. And I'm loving it when I hear stories like yours, because that tells me that the machine can keep right on going, but it's not going to stop what I consider to be pure science, which is what you're doing and what they're doing.
I don't know about myself. I'm not much of a scientist, and that's not my background for sure. I mean, I wasn't interested in this sort of thing. I was interested in health, but yeah, the nanoparticle element and the computer side of things that is connected to that, and like the electromagnetics, like you mentioned, I would not have gone looking for that stuff if I hadn't come across it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that again, that's the way science used to be done. Nobody was an expert at everything. They recognized. And there were no deep specialties. You couldn't get a PhD in neurobiology as it applies to the chemistry of the bone or something like that. You couldn't do that kind of thing. It just wasn't even a possibility. So everyone was a generalist, and they were generalists in their own little areas, and they were comparing notes all the time. Well, that's essentially what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it would be.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And to me, it's the purest kind of science, because it's a science. First of all, it's a science without credentials, which I absolutely love, because I think the credentials get in the way. I don't think there's anything wrong about going after a credential. I just think that we put too much emphasis on them. We say that they're more important than they really are. So it removes that particular block. And when you remove that block, your minds are wide open. I mean, you have to be as wide open as possible to explore this anyway. Because like you said, you don't even know anything about computers. You don't know anything about nanotechnology. It's just not part of your sphere of knowledge. So if you want to attack this in any way, you have to be completely open-minded about the whole thing. But that's the essence of science. The essence of science is to be completely open-minded, to not be locked into pre-existing beliefs and theories and so forth that kind of force you in a direction that you wouldn't do if your mind was truly open. So yeah, calling yourself a scientist and a really good one.
Yeah, for sure.
It's good stuff. So where are you going next? I mean, I know you have the course, but what's next on your radar?
I do offer consultations, and I'm going to do the live program next week. That's just the nano detox. If people want like closer, more attention, then I can work with them longer. If they want to put a little group together, like they've got a family, they want to do that, they can contact me. And they can just call me for a free consult. I think I gave you a QR code, or they can just go to my website, fionaforhealth.com, and then go to contact and click on the consultation link, and then we can talk, and maybe, what I've got for them could fit and maybe not. Yeah, that's about it. I also, I have a document, an EMF document. So I put together a document on just ways that you can protect your body and protect your home from electromagnetics. So that's on the website too.
Okay, very good. I'll put we'll make sure that the QR code ends up on the webpage. But most podcast platforms, the description area doesn't allow for a graphic in there. So we'll make sure we'll include your website, because that's going to be the easiest way through the show notes for people to reach you. So we'll make sure that we do that. Yeah.
Awesome.
We have a couple things that we want to do before we wrap up for the day. First of all, we want to thank you, because this is, wow. I mean, one of the reasons I love doing this podcast is all the things that I learned. Anne-Marie, here's an example of it, right?
I mean, yeah, we've not had this one before, have we?
No, totally new. So I'm loving that part. And we're appreciating that you take the time to do this. I'm sure you're doing this with other podcasts, and I think it's wonderful that you're doing that. One thing that is really appropriate to share with you is something that I like to do with our other guests, because everybody who comes onto the program, I mean, they've all been through something really challenging, usually a trauma of some kind, maybe it was something from childhood. They came out the other side, they discovered tools or tricks or ideas or whatever that helped them get through, and they want to share it with the world. And so that's why they end up being on the podcast and writing books and creating courses and coaching and all the other stuff. In the course of doing that, they're creating a lot of free content because they want to help get the information out, kind of like your friend did with the YouTube video, kind of like some of the stuff that you're doing. And it occurred to me that we don't give enough credit for that. So I want to make sure I give you credit as well.
Thank you. It broke up a little bit. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you. So let me give you the full version. The full version is this. On behalf of those people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, never will see, who have been taking in that content you've been creating and learning about stuff that they didn't even know about and that you don't even realize that they're getting. On their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a big difference.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having this chat. It's been really nice.
And I also, one of the reasons I love having my co-hosts, including Anne-Marie, is first of all, I love having them on the show because they add a wonderful element to it. But they also have the perspective that I don't have. They get to, they participate, but they also are like the on-site listener, so to speak, you know, the active silent witness. And in the process of being that person, they have a perspective that I can't possibly have. So I always go to them and say, how do you tie all this together? And I get some amazing answers when I do that. So Anne-Marie, how do you tie this one together today?
I think for me, I love the aspect of the idea of this, because I'm not a big fan of just taking pills all the time, because you're just putting chemicals into your body. And I love the fact that this is taking something unhealthy out of your body. I think that's amazing. But I think the one thing that has really stood out for me, and that is Fiona herself, is the tenaciousness, the just not giving up, the going for it and persevering and getting there and sharing it. So my big take from today's show is just don't give up, don't settle, go for it.
And Fiona's just sitting there saying, yep, that's it.
Yep.
Like, it's so easy. It's so simple. We know it's not simple. I mean,
it's not simple, is it?
No. Once you do this process, I mean, there's just a couple of missing pieces, I think. You know, I mean, a lot of people who are chronically ill, they'll try all kinds of things, but there's these few missing pieces. Once they put those in there, then everything else they're doing is going to work so much better.
Yeah. That's probably the other great thing that comes from having this kind of really new, interesting information. Every time we hear something new, I mean, not all the things that get proposed here on the program work. Right? They sound great, you know, but they don't always work. But some of them do. And you never know which ones they're going to be.
Yeah.
You have to kind of try them in your own life and find out, no, first of all, do they apply? If they apply in your life, then you can give them a try. And in the process of doing that, you end up basically becoming your own self-scientist. You're doing your own study on yourself. So even if you don't have a particularly positive result from even doing this, I mean, maybe this is not what's causing somebody's particular chronic illness situation. That's fine. But what happens is, even if they try this and it doesn't work, just the act of trying these things out leads to other things. That's what happened with you. That I'm convinced that's how you found your friend on YouTube. You tried one thing and it didn't work. You tried the next thing, it didn't work. You tried the next thing, it didn't work. And somewhere along the line, that guided you to his podcast, to his YouTube channel.
Yeah, exactly.
That process, that's the most important takeaway from these conversations. That there's a process to discovering these things on your own, to, in the terms of law of attraction, to attract them into your life. And you follow that.
Yeah.
That's admirable.
I hope it doesn't take someone else 20 years, though. That's what
Well, that's why you're doing this, right? Because you don't want everybody else to take 20 years. You want to do it in a lot less time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's admirable. Well, thank you again for being on the program. Thank you for sharing this stuff. We really appreciate it. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been really nice. I can feel your heart.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Look, glad to hear that you're off to wonderful stuff you were telling us about beforehand. So yeah, good luck with all that, and we'll see
you
in your travels. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.